Hey, good morning, LifeBridge. It's great to have you join us here online. I'm Mark. I'm the lead pastor here at LifeBridge, and we're so glad that you could join us this morning. What a privilege it is to be together and to hear from the Lord together, to worship Him, even in this format of being online together. What a gift it's been for this past year, and we hope for the years to come that we can always connect online, and we're glad that you're here. And I'm going to give you a few updates on what's coming before we get into our worship. And we know this past year has been a lot of disconnection. That's why we have an online connect card, so that we can stay connected with you and you can stay connected with us. So if you can click on the link below, it gives you an opportunity to tell us who you are if you're new to our online community, or if you've been in person and we don't know who you are yet. Let us know who you are, and if there's any special requests or prayer requests or praises that we can hear about what's happening in your life. Our staff meets and prays every week, and we just want to know how we can be a blessing to you. So take advantage of that. Let us know how things are going, and we'll connect with you. So even though COVID seems to be on the mend, things are improving because of vaccines and all that good news, which is great. But we know that some of the impact from COVID is going to last for weeks and months and maybe even longer. If you know someone that isn't a part directly of our congregation or our community here at LifeBridge, we want to be a blessing to people in our community. So we've set aside some funds. We have a COVID relief fund that's available now. One of our elders is overseeing that, and the board has kind of funded this account because of some of the finances that you guys have already given. And we want to be a blessing to our community. So there's a link that you can send to one of your friends, a coworker, a neighbor that you've heard might be out of work or might be struggling with a practical need. And if they fill out that line and send it back into us, we will contact them and see how we can bless them. Now, this is not for like the big things. They need a new car or need to buy a house. But man, if they're struggling getting food or clothing or need some gas money or pay an electric bill, those are the types of ways we want to bless our community. So follow the link below. You be the representative and the missionary from our church to go out and tell a friend, like, hey, we want to be a blessing to you. If you have questions, contact us here at the church in the office and we'll answer those for you. But follow that link and go be a blessing. Hopefully you're on our emailing list, because if you are, you got an email this week, and within that email there was a letter from Karol Nations, the chairperson of our board. And Karol's forming a campus task force to be a part of improving our facilities in the months and years to come. So we're looking for some people within our church that want to be a part of helping us dream about the coming years at our church. You know, we have a hill here on campus that's undeveloped, and we're praying about, could we level that and make it usable for our preschool, for our BridgeKids, for our teenagers, even for families or future outdoor weddings, who knows. And we also know that we'll have space up there to maybe build a building someday, that we could increase the attendance for our preschool, or have more space to do things for our teenagers or our BridgeKids. And so we want to investigate those possibilities in the coming months. So if you have any kind of expertise or experience in realty or in building or in certain aspects of the building, and stormwater or electricians or permitting, we want to encourage you to consider being a part of this task force. So how do you do that? You simply email Karol Nations, again, our chairperson of our board. Tell her who you are and what you're about, and find out a little bit more about when this task force is going to start meeting. And it's not an intense commitment, but it's one that we want to gather some people who can help lead us in answering some of these questions moving forward. So consider that and jump into getting involved here at LifeBridge. Hey, not only is it nearing the end of the month of March already, we're like a quarter of the way through this year, but it's almost time for a great weekend, and that's Easter. And we want to let you know what's happening Easter weekend. We're excited about the Good Friday event that we're planning, and it's an event, but it's also just an opportunity for you or your family to come and be a part of just remembering what Jesus did leading up to the cross. And so what's going to happen on that Good Friday evening, we're going to have the staff will be here from 6 to 7 at least, and we'll be hosting certain stations, but you're going to follow an online guide that's going to give you scriptures and opportunities to stop and remember what Jesus did on His physical way to the cross that Good Friday 2,000 years ago. And we're really looking forward to that evening. So obviously it's open to everyone. You can invite someone to join you. You can drive through those stations in your car, or you could park and walk through and take a little more time. But it's a very COVID-friendly way to be a part of remembering what Jesus did on the cross. And then, of course, on Sunday morning, Easter morning, we're looking forward to our 9 a.m. in-person service in the parking lot if you're able to join us. And so I would tell you that if you're part of our church, we're expecting that there'll be a good turnout. So if you want to bring a beach chair or something like that to help us on Christmas Eve, we almost ran out of chairs, and we expect Easter to be well attended as well. We're going to have baptisms. There's going to be a special kids program and some gifts that Nancy's putting together. And we're looking forward to just having a great morning to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and the hope He provides us on Easter. So join us that whole weekend, and we look forward to celebrating with you. We're grateful for all of you who filled out our survey a couple weeks ago that gave us some information on how you're feeling about this whole transition season that we know is coming back into more normal environments. And so we are making a change and adding an opportunity to start the transition to back indoors. So the Sunday after Easter, Sunday, April 11th, we're going to be adding a second in-person service at 10:30 on Sunday mornings. Now, it's going to look a little different than you're used to. We're going to have an online opportunity to worship and to sing and to hear from the Lord. We're going to have an in-person in the parking lot opportunity where we get to worship and hear from the Lord together. But when we move indoors, we're going to ask that you wear masks while you're indoors to protect each other. And it's going to be a preaching only service where we're not going to be singing indoors, just to protect each other. And that's according to the directives we're getting from our local and our state leaders. And we're excited about this first step, we know of many, to getting back to what we view as normal when we're able to worship the Lord together in our facility. So if that's a blessing to you, plan on joining us Sunday, April 11th at 10:30 for a preaching only service with your mask, but in our sanctuary, so we can hear from the Lord together. We hope that you can join us. It's time for us now to enter into time of worship through singing and through hearing from God through His Word. So we're going to do that with our worship team and then hear from God through Brendan, who's going to be preaching this morning. But before we do that, I just want to take a minute and thank the church of LifeBridge. How you've been reaching out to each other, how you've been looking after each other and shepherding each other, how so many of you have been giving sacrificially to keep the work of this ministry moving forward. We can support our missionaries in so many other ways. So there's a link in the service today that allows you to go directly to giving. If you want to do that as an act of worship this morning, we're grateful for the way God has provided through His people during this season. And as we have an opportunity now to worship God and to hear from Him, we want to invite you into that. And thank you for joining us today.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. To the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, God was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, it shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of kings. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of kings. Praise forever to the King of kings.
In 1942, a brilliant chemist by the name of Louis Fieser worked in a secret basement lab at the university known as Harvard. A brilliant man in a brilliant, fantastic laboratory developing some wild things. One of the things that he's lesser known for is developing vitamin K and the molecular structure and all that's done, and all of that has actually contributed to a lot of sciences today. Him and his wife also worked on the steroid medicine cortisone, but that's not what Louis Fieser is known for. Louis Fieser is most famous for working alongside some other brilliant chemists to develop some crazy things having to do with fire. These chemists were hell-bent on developing fire in a lot of different ways. Some of the crazy things that they even made were an incendiary notebook for spies, that when the pen was removed there was a countdown timer that the notebook itself would turn into a bomb. They also developed this pocket fireball that, when used in war, could clear a whole room in a matter of seconds. But those are not what Louis Fieser is most well known for. Louis Fieser and these other chemists tried a lot of different materials, a lot of different chemicals, and created a globular, sticky substance that burned at 1,800 degrees. This compound, this weapon, this incendiary material is known as napalm. Many of us, when we think of napalm, we think of the Vietnam War. At least I do. I'm not that old. And so when I think of napalm, I think of movies with a helicopter flying across and Creedence Clearwater Revival playing in the background and the jungle and all that. But napalm was actually first used in Japan. It was used in World War II and then in the Korean War, being dropped all over North Korea. And now I don't want to talk today too much about how napalm was used, but why it was made. Napalm is made up of this material called aluminum salts. And what aluminum salts were made from was naphthenic acid and palmitic acid. And they created out of these acids this aluminum salts that when it would land on something, it would almost burn with an excitement, a fervor, a determination to suck up all the oxygen in the area and grow at a rapid degree. Napalm was deadly. Napalm was destructive because that's what it was made to do. Napalm was intentionally designed to create mass destruction. And Fieser and his cohorts, his colleagues, designed it in this way. They tried some things and they weren't sticky enough. They tried other things and the fire would go out too quick. No, they made napalm with an intentional usage, with intentional efficiency. And now, as I think about napalm today, You think, man, that would be maybe helpful. Maybe we could use some napalm. Maybe the next time you have a bonfire in your backyard, you get a little bit of napalm and drop it in there. Or if you're a smoker, you just grab a little bit of napalm and light your cigarette or your cigar on. Or maybe at Christmas time, you want to have a pretty lit Christmas table, so you just drip some napalm across the table for this nice warm glow. No, you wouldn't do that. Because that's not the point of napalm. That's not why it was created. That's not what those aluminum salts and the heat and the fire were meant for. No, napalm was used for destruction. Napalm was used for wartime efforts. And weirdly enough, today, I want to talk about napalm and how we are also salt and light. How we are similar to napalm in our usages and what we're made for, but not in a way of destruction. No, Jesus has got a very different reason for why he calls us salt and light. He doesn't call us aluminum salt. He doesn't call us burning destruction light of napalm. No, he has a very different reason as to why we are salt and light. And we have to ask, for what purpose? Why did Jesus make us salt and light? Napalm was made with aluminum salts and this light, this heat, this fire for a specific reason. Why has Jesus made us salt and light? We're going to find out today in Matthew 5. And as we dig into Matthew 5, we have to remember that Jesus is teaching the Sermon on the Mount. He's giving us almost the Christian constitution, our marching orders, our modus operandi, if you will, our MO. How to do what we are called to do, what we are supposed to be as Christians. And not only is he giving us the what, but he's giving us the why. Why are we salt and light? Because as we will see in our text, it's not you should be salt and light, I want you to be salt and light. He says you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Now, with those new identities, what do we do with that? Why are those our identities? These are questions I'm excited to dig into Matthew 5 with us today. So if you want to flip in your Bibles to Matthew 5, verse 13. I want to start, if you are looking in the description, there's some notes there. Our big idea for today, our main point is this, is that as Christians, God has made us salt and light to be agents of redemption. As Christians, God has made us salt and light to be agents of redemption. And so, first we have to ask, what kind of salt are we? What kind of light are we? As we dig into Matthew 5 today, I hope that we get to answer some of these questions of how we do that, how we bring the flavor of God into the world. So we're going to read Matthew 5, verse 13 to 20 to figure out these God-given purposes and characteristics of us as Christians. Because his goal is the rescue of humanity, to rescue people from the grasp of sin and death. So Matthew 5, verse 13, and we're going to read through verse 20. Matthew 5, verse 13, here we go. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Then he goes on in verse 17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So we have these pretty wild things that Jesus is saying to us, and I'm really excited to dig into them. Our first point is this today, that salt without saltiness is worthless, even damaging. And we see Jesus talking about how salt is used and how salt that is saltless, or it's not salty at all, has no purpose. There's no point to something that doesn't work to do what it's designed for. You wouldn't own a vacuum that doesn't suck up dirt. You wouldn't wear sunglasses that don't block out the sun. When things don't do what they're designed for, they're worthless. And the same is true that is of salt that has lost its saltiness. So as we think about salt, let's go back into the context of Jesus' day. What were the two main uses of salt in that day? The two main uses were preservative and flavor. And that's pretty true of salt today. Sometimes we use it to salt our roads, or to use it, maybe you have a nice Himalayan salt lamp in your room. It's got good ions and vibes, right? But for the most part, it's preservative and flavor. Preservative in Jesus' day, when you would butcher an animal, they didn't have refrigerators or coolers or freezers to keep it from spoiling, so they would pack it with salt to keep what was beneficial and good and necessary from turning awry, from spoiling. So preservative first, and then the second one was flavor. Salt's a flavor just like it is today. And you know, like take a second, and you know when you've eaten something that needed more salt. You ever tasted something that was a baked good that didn't have salt in it? You're like, this is missing something, right? Salt's a necessary flavor, and it was so in Jesus' day as well. Salt, as we know, reduces bitterness in certain degrees, and other times it increases bitterness. It increases sweetness and decreases sweetness. It provides that savory, that umami, if you will, flavor to pop. Salt is necessary for our foods. There's a chef named Samin Nosrat, and she wrote a book and did a Netflix series called Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat. And she identifies that those are the four main characteristics to making food good. And salt is one of them. It's not oregano, fat, acid, heat. It's salt, because salt is that important. And salt that isn't salty doesn't do either of those things. Fake salt doesn't preserve, and unsalty salt doesn't add any flavor to your food. I wanted to tell you a story. A couple summers ago, Katie and I were supposed to go to a wedding in the Bahamas. And now we don't go to the Bahamas very often. Neither of us have ever been. But we wanted to make it a little bit longer of a trip, because not often do you get the chance to go to the Bahamas. And we were going to make it our anniversary trip. But the wedding got canceled, and so we were like, man, let's do something else. We still want to celebrate and do something fun. And our budget is a little small, so we're like, hey, let's go camping. That would be awesome. So what we decided to do was go to St. George, Utah, which if you've ever been to St. George, it's beautiful, it's amazing. If you haven't been, go check it out. And so we were going to camp, and I wanted to use my pickup truck to camp in, and so I borrowed my buddy's pickup camper. And what a pickup camper is, if you can imagine a pickup truck with the bed here, it's a camper that slides into the bed. So you can imagine it's a little tight, it's a little small. And we were told that the fridge did not really work that well on the camper, and there was no freezer. So I thought, you know what? Then I just got to bring a cooler, right? And now I'm not a very rich man. I don't have super fancy coolers. I know that there's really fancy coolers out there. You can spend $500-600 on a Yeti, and it has like its own its own atmosphere inside, and it like reloads your gun for you and like does your taxes. I don't know what they all do, but they seem really fancy. I don't have one of those, but you know what I do have? I got my trusty $25 Walmart Coleman cooler and my little boy Blue, and he did terrible on the trip. He was awful. He did not do the one thing I needed him to do, which was cool. As you can imagine, St. George, Utah in the summer, it's about 100 degrees in the day, 80 degrees at night, and every day waking up to all of the ice being melted, all of our food getting wrecked. It was the worst. You ever picked up a carton of eggs where the cardboard is just mush? It's terrible. Or your bread gets all soggy, and literally it just felt like I had bought a jacuzzi for my food to swim in. They're like, thanks for the Coleman brand jacuzzi, Brendan. Really appreciate it. It was not helpful at all. All I needed this cooler to do was keep my food cold, and the one thing I needed it to do, the one thing it was designed to do, it didn't do. And so it is with us. Whereas we are supposed to be the salt of the earth, as Jesus has commanded us to be, when we are not. The purpose that we are designed for, when we are not doing that, it's useless. Let's read verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salt again? How can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. First, we got to ask, what does it mean to be the salt of the earth? It's a phrase that I think you maybe have heard somebody say in a movie or in the past. It's not one I use every day. Maybe you do. But what it means to be the salt of the earth is to be agents of redemption. To be little Christs in the world. To bring the flavor of God to those around you. So before we get into this next part, I want you to take a second and ask, what kind of salt have you been? Have you been salty salt? Have you been unsalty salt? Have you been aluminum salt? What kind of salt have you been? And so there's three ways that I believe that we can be the salt of the earth, because I think sometimes we could read that and go, that sounds really nice, I'd like to do that, but how? How do I do that? I want to give you 3 ways that we as Christians can be the salt of the earth. The first one is this: preserving the name of Christ in how you live your life. Preserving the name of Christ in how you live your life. What Jesus knew is that we would lose our salt at times. As he commands here, he says, hey, what is salt without its saltiness? He knew that we would fault towards losing our saltiness at points. And so what we need to do is preserve the name of Christ in how we live our life, meaning keeping that saltiness. There's distractions that are going to keep us away from having that saltiness. Pursuing success over Christ. Pursuing the opinions of others over God's opinion of us. Pursuing things that are only going to distract us and keep us away from being the salty salt that God wants us to be. Preserving what brings you closer to Christ. Take a second for you and think, man, what are the things that bring me close to Christ? Is it daily devotionals? Is it prayer retreats? Is it being in Christian community? Is it spending time in the Word? I imagine it's all of those things for you. Are you making time for those things? Preserve what keeps your saltiness, that closeness to Christ. The second point is this: the second way for us to be the salt of the earth is to bring the flavor of God into your relationships. Bring the flavor of God into your relationships. And here's what I mean by that. In the same way that salt brings flavor to food and to baked goods and all these different things, bring the flavor of God into the relationships that you have. Bring what God is like to those that you know by living like Him. Romans 8 verse 11 says, "The Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you. He who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through His Spirit who dwells in you." Friends, we have Christ in us. We have Christ dwelling in us, and we need to bring that to those around us. We need to allow Christ to invade our relationships, to bring that flavor of God to others. And now I know that there's days for me that the flavor that I bring is frustration. The flavor that I bring is disappointment. But as we focus on Christ and we allow ourselves to be made salty by Him, we got to bring that flavor of God to others, to give the gift that God has given us unto others and bless them, because we've got that spiritual discernment. We've got Christ living in us. Allow Christ to live and work through you and bring that to others. The third point is this: be a necessary ingredient to those around you. In the same way that salt is a necessary ingredient, posture yourself in a way and be such a blessing to others that people would be bummed to lose you. Be such a blessing and be such an integral part of helping and serving and being hospitable and being loving to others, that to be apart from your experience, for them to be apart from you, would be to miss out. And that's not because you're so amazing or I'm so amazing, but because the God who is in us is so amazing. What we lay hold to can be a huge blessing to others. We are to bring the character of God to them. And then we know this won't always be perfect. Jesus says that the world is going to hate us in the same way that they hated Him. And so I'm not advocating for being perfect or anything like that. But what I'm saying is be an asset because of the asset of God in you, the greatest gift that you have. Allow that to affect those around you. And I wonder for us as a church, I wonder if LifeBridge Church got up and moved to El Cajon or Temecula or somewhere further away, would our community miss us? Would our community say, it was so great when LifeBridge was around? Or are they just bummed right now because we do outdoor morning services? Even though, the songbird of our generation, Robbie Conrad, has got a great voice. But what I'm saying here is, have we postured ourselves in a way that people depend on us because we're flowing with blessing that God has blessed us first with? We need to be a necessary ingredient to those around you. And to tie in just at the end of this, that salt without saltiness is worthless, even damaging. The last point I want to make on this is the fact that if we claim Christ, if we say we're salty, if we say that we are the salt of the earth, yet we do nothing with it, how does that reflect onto who our God is? How does that let people know what Christ is like? Because if they know a Christian, if somebody, your neighbor, they live next to you for 10, 20, 30 years, and they go, they're Christians, but I see how they live their life, is that what God's like? Friends, we must be truly the salt of the earth, not fake salt, not pretend salt, not a salt mask on our face. We must truly be salt because we hold the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and that's Christ Jesus. So we need to be that, so as we aren't a disappointment or a damage to Christ's name on this earth, because we are to be the salt of the earth. So that's salt. What about light? Point number 2 is this: rage. Rage against the dying of the light. Dylan Thomas wrote this famous poem in 1951, and you've probably heard it. You've probably seen the movie Interstellar, where they used it like over and over again. It's fantastic, great movie. Go watch Interstellar if you haven't seen it. Won't spoil it for you. But Dylan Thomas wrote this poem about his father who was on his way to the end of his life, and he was encouraging him to fight for his life light, to not let the light go out, not let his life end. But today I want to charge you to rage against that which would snuff out the light of Christ in your life. Rage against the dying of Christ's light in your life. That's what I mean by this second point. Fight for Christ in your life. Let Jesus shine through you. And these next verses, verse 14 through 15, Jesus tells us that we are the light of the world. Again, not you should be the light of the world, but you are. That's your identity as a believer. Light would be, in that time, a bit harder to have. You know, I'm sitting here right now teaching, and there's like 15 different lights in this room because it's super easy for us now. And we just think light's kind of like, yeah, it's just normal, right? But at that time, it's like you got candles, you've got a torch, you've got a lantern, and light would make all the difference. You could eat dinner at nighttime. You could go down a road and not run into the carriage that's heading your way because they had a light on their carriage. Light took what was dark and unknown and brought about something useful and productive and good because it was well lit. And so today, as we understand that we are the light of the world, you aren't light for no reason. Napalm was made for a reason. You have been made light for a reason, for a purpose. You are the light so that others may glorify your Father in heaven. You've been made the light of the world so that others may know who God is, so that they may glorify your Father in heaven. And what does that mean? How do they glorify your Father in heaven? The Westminster Catechism puts it in one of my favorite ways. If you haven't read the Westminster Catechism, you should. But here's what it says. What is the point of humanity? What is the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. You are to be a light in the world so that others may glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And they can't glorify Him unless they know Him. And they can't enjoy Him unless they know Him. You are a light so others may know Him. You know, it's a weird thing going to Bible college. I don't know if you're watching this, if you've attended a Christian university or gone to Bible college. It's kind of funny. It's kind of a weird, unique thing. I grew up going to public school, and I remember sitting in Bible college one day, and I was like, this is kind of weird. I can't really like evangelize my classmates here. I was kind of used to sharing Jesus with people at my school, and Bible college is weird for a lot of reasons. I imagine trying to evangelize on like a Bible college campus is kind of like trying to sell like Teslas in La Jolla. Everyone's like, yeah, we're on board. We already got one. It's cool. Like we're all on the same team here. But the reason I want to talk to you about why Bible college is interesting today is because as I attended there, I found through Bible college my light starting to die. And I saw that not only in me, but others as well. I went to Bible college for a year, and then I took a year off studying abroad and doing school online. And then when I came back, my friends had kind of changed. I had changed a little bit. I let some of my passion die, and I started doing things I'd never done before. Started hanging out with friends that were doing stuff I knew I shouldn't. Started going out with them and getting drunk and drinking. And my priorities started to shift. The things that I valued started to change. I was allowing the light of Christ in me to go out. If it was a torch that needed fuel, I wasn't fueling it. I was fueling other things in my life, fueling my flesh, fueling my desires. And it wasn't just me. I saw that happening to other people as well. When your school is sun up to sundown Bible, as sermons are your homework and reading Christian books is your assignments, and those are your textbooks, it's easy to let it just become numb to you. And I saw that with other people too. We started to allow our lights to die. Instead of pursuing holiness, we didn't fuel the fire of Christ in us. We weren't pursuing holiness together. And we were studying to be in ministry, but the very ministries that we wanted to do, we were disqualifying ourselves from by the way we were living our lives. And I wonder if you today, have you seen that happen in your life? If you look back on your life, can you see a time where you were so passionate about Jesus, but now that bonfire that once was is a small tea light? Now, I'm not saying that you have to be Francis Chan or Matt Chandler or some massive pastor or evangelizer or something like that for you to have a big fire. That's not the fire I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fire of passion. The commitment to Jesus, that your life is wholly His. Can you look back on your life and see that? Have your priorities shifted? Is your focus elsewhere? Is what you were once known for maybe changed because you've allowed your passion to diminish? Let's read verse 14 through 15 in Matthew 5. Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." I want to give you 2 ways on how you can be the light of the world. The first one is this: be mindful you are always shining something. Be mindful that you are always shining something. The strange thing about humans is that we are always worshiping. There's always something we're putting out there, and I don't mean like manifesting, like putting it out to the universe. What I mean is we're known for stuff. When you think about the people you know them for things, and for us as humans, we're always shining something. And what I see that in my life when someone goes, "Hey Brandon, you should meet this person." I'm like, "I don't know that person." They're like, "Oh, look them up." I go on their Instagram, their Facebook, I maybe like hear some stories about them. I hear what they're shining. I see what they're posting about. I hear what they're talking about. So for us as Christians, we gotta be aware that we're either shining Jesus or we're not. Because we're always shining something. What are you shining? I'm not advocating here for putting on a mask. Please friends, don't hear me saying that. I'm not saying go on your social media and clean it up or only talk one way at work and a different way at home. What I mean is have purity of heart, purity of soul all the way throughout. So the thing that you're shining is just naturally Jesus. Just naturally shining Him because that's what's within you. The second thing is this, is that the world needs light as it is full of darkness. Friends, it's really easy for us to think that we're just one of the many different truths out there. It's really easy for us to think like, well, they don't want to hear about Jesus because they probably believe something different. But we have to know that Christ is the one true life and everything else is darkness. And unfortunately, a lot of darkness masquerades as light. A lot of things out there are claiming, I'm good, I'm what you need, I'm what's fulfilling, but we know what's fulfilling. We know what's true. We know that what we are as Christians, we lay hold to a peace that can calm unrest, a calm that can help anxiety. We lay claim to hope that can help with pain, a joy that can be brought to brokenness. Our marching orders for us as Christians are to bring light into the darkness. Don't put your light under a bowl. Don't hide it away for Sunday mornings only. Let that light shine. Let it be a bonfire of love and grace and the attributes of God to those around you. Will you shine Jesus this week, or will you shine yourself? Will your social media show everyone how great you are or how great your Messiah is? Will your conversations tell others, man, that person is just such a complainer? Or will you say, man, that person's got it rough, but they really seem to be trusting in that Jesus guy? And how is all this possible? How can we be salt and light? I don't know about you, but when I think about the things that God calls us to, sometimes I'm like, that's too much. I can't do all that. How is it possible that we can be salt and light? And my third point is this: Christ is redeeming all things. Christ is redeeming all things. Revelation 21:5 says, "He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new." That has been the heart of God from the law to Jesus to now, to make all things new, to save people from the clutches of sin and hell. And so let's look back. What is the law? Because we know this next passage, we read it before, is that Jesus says that he's fulfilling the law. What was the purpose of the law? The purpose of the law was redemption. The purpose of the law was to set people free from their sins, to make peace with God because they were broken and God was perfect. The point of the law was redemption. And we see Jesus saying in this passage that he is the one fulfilling the law. And he says that I'm not changing it, I'm not abolishing it, I'm not getting rid of it. I'm fulfilling it, meaning that the heart of the law is carried through into Jesus. It's not something different. It's the completion of it. It's the final stand. That Jesus is completing the law, providing salvation for both the Jew and the Gentile, so that way they could have identity and sonship and to be salt and light into the world. We are able to be salt and light because Christ has finished. It is finished in Christ, that he has fulfilled the law. The heart of God is redemption all the way through. I used to work on Young Life staff, and it was an amazing ministry. If you don't know Young Life, it's an outreach ministry to middle schoolers, high schoolers, college kids. And when I was on Young Life, we used to go up to this camp in Ramona, which maybe some of you have heard of, called LifeBridge. It is now called The Oaks. It's owned by Bob Goff, so it's real cool and fancy now. But at this camp, we used to do these planned sneak outs for kids. Kids would always be like, I want to sneak out at night. And we'd always like hear them. They try to be so sneaky. And we'd be like, okay, you guys want to sneak out? Like, let's go for it. And then we'd let them devise this whole plan. And we'd like interject, like, oh, maybe we should go there. And they'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And the whole time we were masterminding it. We were talking to the staff of the camp. We were planning it with them. And it was just the funniest thing of all time. Kids would take it so seriously. They would like dress up in all black and like paint their faces like camouflage, and they would like take off like their like shoes because they didn't want to make it more sound, and we would like sneak out the door like one by one, and we'd be like running through the bushes. And gosh, I just have this vivid image of one time we were running, we're like, hit the deck, like someone's coming, and a kid just running full sprint and just stiffening like a board and just hitting the ground. It was so funny. And the whole time we're there, and then we like sneak into the game room, and like everyone's like playing games, we're trying to be quiet, and then we get caught by the staff, and then we just full sprint back to the cabin. And like, I kid you not, like these kids were Usain Bolt speed. Like just the drive they had in them to not get caught just took them to a level of running that I've never experienced. And it was so funny. We'd get back into the cabin and we'd be like, get into your sleeping bags, like they might do room checks, we have to make sure it's not us. And you just hear these like just like muffled breathing under their sleeping bags, trying to like stay calm, and their like hearts are just racing. And it was so funny, and the kids had such a blast. The next day we'd be like, don't tell anyone, it's a secret, and they're like, okay, and like they had all these code names for it and stuff. And it was just such a blast. It added such a unique element to the weekend. But one of the funniest things we would do about those sneak outs is maybe like 3 or 4 years later, we would tell the students, we'd be like, hey, you know, when we did that sneak out, that was actually planned. And they'd be like, no, like my world is shattering, like that wasn't, oh my goodness. But there was one student who was uniquely thankful for that. I mean, like we told all these kids, and they'd be like, oh my goodness, but that was still so fun. But one student in particular, I remember, he thanked me for that weekend and said, thank you for playing that sneak out. Thank you for taking me to camp. Thank you for the cabin times and the devos and even the sneak out. Even though it was planned, it added such a fun element to the weekend because he saw the whole picture. He saw what had been set up for him to experience God. The student was just so thankful that he had an opportunity to experience Jesus. And there was a lot of things at home that would have kept him from that. And I knew his story. There was a lot of things. But because of this whole plan that we had for him to experience Jesus, he got an amazing opportunity to and became a believer. And so it is with Christ. Christ is revealing the bigger picture here. Christ is showing that the law had always been for redemption, and Christ's coming was for redemption. Not that the Old Testament law was a trick like we were tricking those students, but the point is that it was for redemption then, and it was for redemption now as Christ was speaking, and God's heart for redemption is forevermore. Christ will always be for redemption. God has always wanted redemption. Let's read verse 17 through 20, and let's get into how we can live this out. Verse 17 says this, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and it teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So what does that mean for us? To be salt and light, we need to live out these two truths. Let me submit these two truths to you. The first one is this: God's heart is, was, and forever will be for redemption. God's heart is, was, and forever will be for redemption. God in the Old Testament was working towards redemption. Christ here is working towards redemption. And Christ today is still longing for redeeming of broken humans. And we even see that in the Old Testament, there might be some things that seem a little weird, right? Leviticus 19:19 is this interesting verse about how you're not supposed to mix fibers together. And I'm like wearing like only mixed fibers right now, right? And so we're like, how do we live that? What's the point of that? But the point of that for the people was that there are some things that are holy and some things that are secular. That those mixed fibers were only used for temple worship. And so to not use that outside of it, to remember that there is a place of worship for God, that God is separate from brokenness on the earth. And that's the same heart that we hear Paul communicate in Romans. Do not be conformed to the ways of the world, but allow your mind to be transformed by Christ. And that's a paraphrase. But what we see here is that God's heart has been the same all along, and Jesus is saying that's his heart. He's not changing things. It's always been for redemption. And the second point is this, is that because of Christ, our righteousness does surpass the Pharisees. Because of Christ, our righteousness does surpass the Pharisees. At the end of this verse here, in this passage, verse 20 says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." Because of what Christ has done, we are more righteous than the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, because we have an alien righteousness that's been given to us, Christ's righteousness. When we die, we're going to stand before the Lord. And the way we've lived our life is going to be judged. We're going to be judged whether worthy of heaven or unworthy, and to be separated from God in hell. And the reality is that as Christians, our scales have been rigged in our favor. That as we stand there and we put all of our junk on the scale, Jesus stands next to us and puts his righteousness on there. It's not what we've done, it's what he has done. He has made us righteous. So that way we can enter the kingdom of heaven. So let's bring this all together. Let's bring it home. What do we do? How do we live this out this week? Let's remember that Christ has called us to be salt and light. To be salt in how we live our lives, making us the light of the world so that our good deeds will shine for him. Not our deeds, not the deeds of the flesh, but the good deeds of Christ, so that others may know him. And how is that possible? Because Christ has fulfilled the law. And what is the point of the law? What is the point of Christ? It's redemption. He has made us salt and light for the purpose of redemption. And that's always been God's heart. God's heart has always been for redemption and is today. And so as you go out this week, maybe this afternoon, whenever you watch this, maybe tomorrow morning, would you live as salt and light in the world, for the sake of the world's redemption?